But yeah, we were actually in a closet for quite some time.
Oh yeah, you can get great sound in a closet.
It was awesome. It was just too small. I mean, we
This
couldn't.
is perfect.
So you'll want to move that just a little bit close. See how it's where it is for me.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
And you can pull that in a little bit maybe.
Yeah, however you're comfortable.
I'm good.
There you go.
No, we were in my it's now my kids' play area, but there's no way the four of us could have fit comfortably in that place. So
This couch wouldn't even have fit in there.
All the equipment you got, man, you got some money wrapped up in equipment.
We started at his kitchen table with some mics and
About $100 worth of equipment,
yeah.
and it sounded okay.
I mean,
Okay.
it got us
In a small room, you can get
Yeah.
it done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the origins of any, entrepreneurial podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you got star power or people backing you, that know what they're doing. You don't know what you're doing, so you just figure it out.
Yeah, we're just a couple of dumb firefighters
We're idiots. Yeah.
trying to
Are you a
figure.
firefighter?
I am. Yeah, I'm actually. I work for him.
Ah,
He tries to be a firefighter.
Yeah,
some days.
he's my boss.
I admire you guys.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's I think we see it both as like a privilege to be able to have this job. I mean, thousands of people test for it
Yeah.
to get these spots, and it's actually a pretty selfish move if you ask me. I mean, I think people see it as like, oh, you do like a selfless job, but I think we love it so much that it just, I don't know, feels selfish to me.
Well, now this here stuff, is this just an avocation for you guys, or?
We've noticed that there's a big gap between high performers in the fire service and everybody else. And I think our intention is to try and make that gap a little bit smaller. You have the top 3% of the people who are on a fire department. And then you have this huge chunk in the middle that is very easily swayed by whoever's at the station that day. They could be a hard charger one day, and then the next day they could, be a total bum depending on who else is around them. And then you have this small percentage at the bottom that you'll never change.
Well, how many years you been in the fire department?
About 15. It's going by fast.
So I'm getting my master's in sport and performance psychology in December. And just hearing my advisor was just at Air Force, and they do a lot of personality assessment type stuff for high performers. And I'm like, oh, I wonder. I was just talking to him, and I was like, I wonder what the personality types would have been between those three groups already. I'm like, oh.
Well, I think was it Nick Saban made a comment at some point. He was basically saying the easiest way to kill morale in a team is to have high performers with low performers because they both hate each other. And so I think we've surrounded ourselves with pretty high performers at our station, but we are 8 people out of almost 500. And there's a few other crews out there that I think do a good job at trying to maintain a high standard. But
what district are you guys in?
Well, it's east of Denver. We can't say it. Our department doesn't allow us to. So
Nice. Well, you guys might be.
you can say it.
Okay.
Aurora?
It might be. It's the East Metro area.
That's right. I think you told me.
Yeah. So no, I've been there for 15 years. You see anything, do anything there.
Sure.
Yeah, I
No.
bet that's you
But-
guys probably are plenty busy depending on what neighborhood you're in
Yeah.
and where you
Yeah.
go to.
But you were a teacher in Aurora, you were saying. Central, right?
Well, Aurora Central and then Rangeview.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, we spent some time near the Hampden and Chambers area. So, yeah, I mean, A-Town gives you all you can handle sometimes,
Yeah.
I
you know.
bet,
It's just so big. It's got to be the second largest city, isn't it?
Was Springs larger?
Springs is
Used to be, but I don't think it is anymore. I think Aurora has
Well, and just the diversity. You get every flavor of every
Yeah.
person.
Yep. Yeah.
for right, wrong, or indifferent.
Exactly,
That's exactly
out
what
the
we
whole
get.
spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you both you guys grow up in Aurora?
no.
Oh,
No.
you just worked there.
Yeah, I started teaching back in 1967. Don't laugh.
My dad grew up in a
I'm
really
not
nice
laughing.
place called Commerce City, Colorado.
Oh, Combat City.
so,
In a luxurious area.
so my first 4 years of teacher were up in Steamboat Springs, which I really enjoyed.
I bet you did.
I really did.
Far
yeah.
cry from Del Mar Circle in Peoria.
Boy, that's the truth. And then I left there and went to the University of Northern Colorado. Got a chance to be the assistant track coach up there, and I worked on my master's, got it, and I was going to stay up there, but I about starved to death.
So when I try to look up TJ Henderson, because Lacey came out and spoke to my baseball team a few months back, and she mentioned you, and of course I was introduced to her by a kid on my team. His grandfather knows you, but it just says TJ Henderson, Denver track legend. You know?
I've never Googled my dad before.
Yeah.
I should Google their
Right.
dads.
TJ Henderson, Denver track legend. But track, right? That's what it was growing up.
I hope it was track and field and not a horse track, dog track or something.
8-track.
It was the dog track.
Yeah.
It's Commerce City after all.
Yeah. You know, being a decathlete, how do you train for a decathlon?
Well, I did that for, God, I don't know, it must have been a good 15, 20 years. And you just break it down, you know, like you got the throws. So one day we'll just go out and we'll work on the shot and the disc, javelin, and that's all we'll do, just shot, disc, and javelin. And then, of course, nobody, and you can take my word for it, in the decathlon, at least the men's, trains for the 1500 because you don't have time for that.
Right.
That's a distance running. Those guys get up in the morning and run 6-10 miles and stuff. But a decathlete can't do that. So we just incorporate like the 1500 in our warm up. And
Do you guys kind of try to give the other track, everybody else who's running track, different events, do you kind of, hey, we're decathletes, you know, we're the most well-rounded athletes here. We can do it all.
you know, not really.
Yeah, I
Not
feel like
really.
decathlete attitude is the exact opposite. They're like, if
Oh,
you
really?
guys ever need help, I'm happy to rake for you. Like,
Yeah.
we suck compared to you. We're just here for a good time. Do you need a ride? You know, I feel like all my multi friends are just always overly friendly.
Why do you think that is?
What is it? It's I like to think of it as like, you know, he's a jack of many trades, master of some. Master of none.
I was just going to say that. The reason I think they're pretty humble is because we're not worth a damn at anything in particular, but we can do it all. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's most multis are like, you know, very good at like 2 to 3 events, but at the elite level, Paralympic, Olympic level, like most people just specify for one event, and you know, it takes a very specific personality, I think, and person to be able to like have the mental fortitude, the emotional endurance that it takes to do a multi event. Yeah, and just I don't know. Again, it's like the emotional strength to like embrace sucking at a lot of things. Like you can't be good at shot put and the 1500. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Well, most of your decathletes that made it real big had at least 1 or 2 events where they were world class. One that comes to mind for me was a guy by the name of Daly from Great Britain. And he was just exceptional in like the 400 meters and the sprints. And then a good friend of mine, Bill Toomey, who won the Olympic gold in 1968, he was a great quarter miler and a good high jumper. And I mean, he could do all the events, but wasn't really that good at them except for the quarter. So
what did you run
Sometimes
the
finishing
1500?
is good enough.
Yeah.
yeah,
What was your best 1500 time then?
it's none of your business.
Better than me, I'm sure.
Well, I didn't really do well until I was 46. That's when I won the National Masters. But that's because that age group was 46 to 50. So I was at the very beginning, and these guys were older. So, and that was my best 1500. And I'm trying to think what my time was on that. It was like 4.
See,
Four-
you're
four,
good.
that's
No, you're
good.
good. You're
It
good.
was
I
in
don't
the
need to hear.
fours.
I don't
Yeah.
need to hear.
Or something. I'm
I
sure it was
think I heard
4 high.
6 something. 6.
4 high.
I'm like 9.5.
Yeah.
I'm disabled though.
How did you pick your event? Because you started what, pole
I
vault?
started with pole vault. In disabled sport, it's very easy because you choose the event that is available for your disability class. And then being a female athlete as well, like the women have limited availability for events. So for me, it was a choice. At the time, I had 3 options. I had shot put, the 100 meters, and long jump. So like when I decided to like formalize my training and do para sport, I couldn't do pole vault because it wasn't an event. So I was going to race the 100. And like I did okay. I qualified for London, but now that my dad's here, who's also my coach, he can let you know I am not that fast. I'm not that fast.
You're half fast.
So, but like with my gymnastics background with cheerleading, so it was 100 long jump and shot put. The long jump translated really well as far as like my like background with gymnastics and being able to kind of know where you are in space, and you only have to be fast for about like 30 meters max, which is like
That's
a good spot for
that's
me.
your honey hole right there.
Yeah, exactly. As I had a coach who was like, he's like, I don't know what happened, but no matter what I do, no matter what the workout is, after 60 meters, Lace, you die. And so we just, keeping it shorter. And I just, I'm not built like a shot putter. Like I just, just the mass that's required to be a good thrower was not necessarily available to me.
We were talking, TJ, there might be a future for you because we were watching Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel like a couple weeks back, and they got a senior Olympics.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I
I
know.
keep trying to talk him into masters.
You could dominate.
You just need to make a height at this point. It could be 5 feet.
It's not over.
I run every day, but it's to the bathroom now.
How many times?
That's the world record
Yeah,
you don't
there
want.
you go.
Athlete.
It's like an interval for
Yeah,
me. Repetitive.
So take us back to when you were younger and kind of that story of to bring you here now.
Well, all right. How much time do we have? Well, I'll give you the condensed version. So when I was 9, I was diagnosed with a soft tissue cancer called synovial sarcoma. I naturally, coming from an athletic family, I was misdiagnosed for a while. We thought it was maybe growing pains, maybe something from like just being an active kid, like sore from soccer practice or whatever. And we really didn't do anything about it until like my school started calling home, and they were like, what is happening to Lacey's leg? Because I'd complained to my parents, and they're like, you're probably fine. We eventually went to the doctor. This is how you know when you're like raised in a certain type of family. It's full blown cancer. And my parents were like,
Walk it off.
Yeah,
Stop complaining.
you'll probably be fine.
yeah. So it was full brand cancer. And when I was diagnosed, they immediately were like, we need to amputate. And just given like our family history, we were like, that is not an option. That is not feasible. And at the time, it was 1999. So like the internet is very new. Like there's not a lot of Googling and not a lot of transparency as far as like disabled sport, what people with disabilities even do just functionally as a normal civilian person in the world. So we had no capacity of understanding what that was going to look like. So we tried some experimental therapy, did experimental chemo. It didn't work at all. And I started having like signs of like more permanent organ damage from the treatment. So like after 5 months into treatment, they were like, all right, we need to make a decision. And it really was very simplified at that point. They're like, we could amputate or you could not. And that is going to like no more Lacey or you have no more leg. Like that's pretty much your 2 options. And my mom was amazing during like my chemotherapy treatment. Like she learned at-home healthcare. Like I had to do chemotherapy for 8 days a week continuously for 24 hours a day. So she like learned to like give it to me, like so I could go home at least before my immune system plummeted. But I think like for the amputation, it was an emotional time. They only told us about 3 days before my surgery, but that was kind of where my dad and his amazingly, for better or worse, like a good sense of humor kind of puts a lot of stuff into perspective. And when we had that meeting, it was like, I mean, you tell the story better, I think, than I do.
All along, we knew that it was a severe trauma. But I finally asked the doctor, the oncologist, I says, well, what if we just do the operation and get rid of the tumor? I says, what chance? And they go, well, 25 to 30% chance that she'll live.
She'll live.
Yeah.
Right.
So I says, well, what if we do the surgery and then the chemo, just that. And he goes, well, probably 40%. I said, God, is there any other alternative? And they says, well, yeah, the amputation. I said, well, if we amputate, what's about? They goes, well, probably 70% or more. I was mad as hell. Why didn't you tell us that in the very beginning?
Right.
Get the axe, man. Let's chop this thing off. Let's go.
Is this the type of cancer that runs in families? Is this something that's completely out of the blue, or
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, they made it sound like it wasn't hereditary. I mean, like maybe it probably is now. That's just how it works. But we didn't have any family history or anything of cancer. It was just me. It was just like this weird, freaky tumor. At the time, it was like one of the more rare tumors. They normally found it in like younger adult males, like in like kind of meatier areas. And mine was just caged like right behind my kneecap.
so? When you get that news as a parent, is there this desire to be like, how many specialists can we go see to try and find like something to? I mean, at what point are you like, okay, this is what we have to deal with? Like, there is no other, especially when you're saying, you're right, the internet wasn't there. You couldn't, go on these message boards where I'm sure other people have dealt with this. I mean, you're kind of on an island.
Yeah.
That's a great question, and no one's ever asked that. And for you to ask that, because when I first realized that this was life threatening, I got down on my knees. I'm not kidding, and just started praying. I think about it now, and I get a little.
Emotional is the word, Dad.
He's never going to do a podcast. He's never going to do a podcast.
He's like,
again.
what
You're
are
making
these
him cry.
feelings? I'm not ready.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
I quit.
So it's a great question. And all I can say is I just didn't know what to do, where to go, and just, like I said, fell down and just started praying.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're at this point, and as a new dad, and he's a more established dad.
And an old dad.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The oldest dad.
Like
Pretty sensitive.
yeah. Tom calls it having his allergies when he gets.
Oh,
when he
you
gets
have
sick.
an allergies are real bad right now.
Yeah, eyes are welling up. Water eyes, yeah.
No, I mean, after hearing your guys' story, it makes you think of like, all right, if you're in that situation, like, how are you going to handle that? And at a certain point, you have to just kind of say, hey, this is what we are dealing with, and like, you got to make that decision as a parent. And I can't imagine having to make that decision for your daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with you knowing the implications of potential downstream effects of that.
So, Lacey, how old were you?
I was 9.
So, looking back at, you've gone through this whole experience. What do you think a 9-year-old needs at that point from their parents with something like that?
I think my parents nailed it, honestly. Like, when you just basic. Again, I've like told you guys I'm doing sports psychology, so I've like refreshed all my classes. So I feel like I've been very annoying just sharing everything that I'm learning again. But like basic human growth and development, and I think that's why also like as a parent, it's so much harder to go through something like that. A 9-year-old like just doesn't like physically even have the capacity for like long-term conceptual thinking. Like it's just way too abstract to think about what your life is going to look like when you're 30. Like 30 to a 9-year-old is ancient. That's insane. So for me, and I have an older brother who's a year and a half older than me. My parents, like for the most part, we kind of like just integrated my like chemotherapy and my treatment life. Like it just kind of like folded into our normal life. Like I wasn't in school just because I was like sick really often, but I was still like hanging out with my brother, hanging out with like the neighborhood kids. My parents still made me do chores. My dad was like still cracking jokes and like, making inappropriate comments all the time, which is, great. Which like there wasn't a change. Like there wasn't really a drastic emotional like schism, I guess, that happened within our family. Like nobody treated me delicately, like nobody spoke to me like it was going to be the last time they ever, like I just really was treated, I think, like who I was. And I think from as far as my development past that, like I was able to still be Lacey even though I was losing my hair, we had to talk about like dying and amputation and all these things that were really heavy. I think just the fact that my family still embraced who I was and still treated me as much as they could, like within reason, as like who I was, like as a healthy kid. We talk about little kid things, all the little kid things I wanted to do, like that, I think was probably one of the most beneficial ways that like we were able to get through it. And of course, like a parent, like you do have the capacity to do long-term thinking. You do have the capacity to be like, if I disable my child, like how are people going to respond to that? Or if I don't, like, and then my kid dies, like what's the repercussion? I'm sure your brain, I'm not a parent, so I'm sure your brain doesn't even go that far when you think about those things. So I think, so often when I'm asked that question, I like 100% think that probably that experience was more difficult for my family, especially the adult members of my family, my parents, because like when you're a kid, it's a trauma objectively. But it's like, I was on survival mode in the way where it's like, I have to survive this thing. And when you're a 9-year-old, you're like, your brain is just like, you equate cancer, whatever. You don't really know what it means. So you're like, cancer is sickness, and sickness is like when you're sick from school one day. So you're sick and then you just get better, because I didn't identify as a sick kid, a sick person. I was a really healthy kid. But I think for like the adults going through it, I mean, it's a threatening situation, but you're so powerless. Like, I mean, even hearing my dad talk about that, like you have like decisions you can make, but ultimately you have no control over the situation. So I think, I don't know, I think like it's just, there's a lot of things that could have gone better or worse or whatever. But I think, again, like looking back 23 years later, like everything, in my opinion, like really turned out the way it was supposed to be. And I've been able to live an amazing life.
What was that transition going back to school? I think that, I know for me, like that age group is brutal.
Oh yeah.
And they like find,
they're like middle school. Nobody's like, yeah, hell yeah, let's go back to that.
No one's like, that's when I peaked. Like
exactly.
No one says that.
It was never better than middle school.
Yeah.
Yours wasn't. Yours was
No,
horrible.
yeah, no.
I think that's like
spoiler alert. He's like, you had a bad time.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, it was bad.
I mean, how do you handle? I feel like middle school girls, there's no one meaner on the planet, and then you come in with these like obvious like points that people can go after, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
What was that transition like that? And do you think that girls who are in your spot now with social media, like what kind of advice can you give to them?
Yeah. I mean, I think objectively now with social media, with constantly being in contact and like in consumption of like media images, the way that things are supposed to look, the way that like even like beautiful women who have cancer are like still portraying their cancer journey, like, and then, comparing your experience with that. I mean, I think it's like very unhealthy and hard. And to like remember the connections that exist in real life. Like those are the most powerful ones, I think, that help you carry through really, really hard times. Like the internet, there's a time and a place, and a lot of kids make their friendships online and through social media and all that stuff. But I think making sure that like some of your stronger roots are like planted in person is something that just helps fuel you to get you through really, really tough times. But as my dad said, spoiler alert, not that fun. We did not have a good time. I came back to school in the 5th grade, and that school environment was like, it was still relatively small and like pretty diverse. So when I would like reintegrated into school that year, it was pretty good. We were top of the food chain, right? 5th grade. And like the kids all knew me. So like they knew that I was recovering. But I do remember like that was like, the one story that I've told a million times where that kind of projected a lot of things was the time that I wasn't, I know we say like, oh, I was picked last in gym class, but it was the time that I wasn't picked at all. Like we got really into playing like blacktop basketball in the 5th grade, as kids do, you get like super hooked on one thing. And before my cancer diagnosis, I was like a top 3 pick, like for pretty much any, like I was pretty athletic, and like, like puberty hasn't hit for a lot of people. So I was like as tall, and then I just stopped growing. But when I came back from my amputation, all this stuff, at this point, like my dad had me walking really earlier than a lot of kids normally do, especially at my amputation level. And again, he was making jokes. He's like, I'll get you doing hurdles next week, Lace. So I was like, there's a couple things that was happening in like that dynamic. One, I was just so excited to go back to being a normal kid, to like leave cancer land, be done. I was back on 2 feet, as they say. You know, one was just metal. So I was ready to be a kid, and I knew that I could do things. I just knew it was gonna like look a little different, or I needed to like learn. And when we were calling for teams for basketball, I was not a top 3 pick, and I was like, all right, Lacey, be reasonable. Okay, we have this leg. And then they just keep picking people, and then they just started playing without me, and that was like, it was confusing at first because I was like, first of all, I can't believe you chose like Nick Dyack before me because he sucks at everything. Like, how did he get a
He's
play?
actually our guest next
Yeah,
week.
you're like, like he got a D1 scholarship to basketball now. Like, but that in that moment, that was when I realized, like, I think, you know, contrary to how my family treated me and everything, that like the world saw me as different. That like even my own friends and my peer group saw me as somebody different. That this had affected me in a way that I was not going to be the same person. So like mentally, I kind of had like an internal transition where I was like, I need to prove to these people that like I can do whatever it is that I want to do. Which of course now you're like, you know, now I'm just like crippled with stress all the time because I'm such an overachiever. But that's, you know, that's we can talk about that at another time. But then, you know, then I started middle school. And at that point in time too, like my brain, like I had just survived something that most people will never survive in their life. So like a lot of like the pettier, smaller stuff like just didn't affect me the same way. I was like right before puberty when I was diagnosed. So like I didn't quite have like body image issues that I was dealing with. And then middle school came in and like, you know, you're just like constant, like, of course I was getting teased for my prosthetic leg, but I think the reason why it was so hard for me was like, that part didn't bother me. So I didn't really respond to like the bullying on having a prosthetic leg. Cause I was like, man, my leg comes off. Like, that's just, it just be like that sometimes. And I wasn't giving like the response that I feel like that a lot of people wanted. So then like the bullying and everything really escalated. And this was also like on the horizon of like online bullying too. So like there was no one had heard about it. In the 7th grade, like one of our teachers made us do like a journal entry assignment, and like one girl's like online journal thing was just like all about how she did not like me and just like all these things about, and like I didn't know either, but of course it's like you have friends. Like middle school is the weirdest thing because you like find people who are like a little bit like more advancing socially than you. So like, you know, you hear from your friends like, did you see what Molly's thing said about you? And I'm like playing with my Beanie Babies. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't play with these. Like, no, I should check it.
Yeah,
And
like
then-
only dorks play with
yeah,
those,
like
not
nobody.
me.
I don't play with dolls anymore. I'm like 30, like house. You know, and of course you read it. Like I mean, like any natural person would, and that was like really shocking. And I think I tried to hide it as best as a 12, 13-year-old probably did a 0% good job, you know, but you think you're sneaky as a kid. They're not sneaky. If you're a kid, you're not sneaky.
Did you send her like, hey, I was a D1 cheerleader. I'm an Olympian.
No.
I hope you're having a great
I hope
life.
she Googles me. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't even remember that girl's last name. I know her first name was Molly.
Oh, Molly.
Yeah, well then, you know, but
I'm
then
on
there
it.
was
I'm
more.
Googling- I'm
Yeah,
on it.
Molly.
Tom's going to
I'll
find
find
her,
out.
Hill Middle School.
and we're going to get her on
There's
here.
probably
Just
only
need a
one
yearbook.
Molly that's ever gone to that school. No, and well, and then it escalated, you know, and then you're just power in numbers. Cause then like I hung out with like a lot of the boys cause, you know, I came from like a sport world. My dad was a teacher and a coach. So like my summers were spent like at track speed camps and like with my brother, and like the only other kid in our neighborhood was a boy. So I was always doing boy stuff. That's why I had to play with dolls by myself. Cause like I was always playing cops and robbers, and I always had to be the cop, which was never cool. But you know, and then you go to middle school, and then I think like what made it really difficult too is my brother was a year older than me, so I always had like a protection security system built in until they left, you know, and then it was like the final year, and it was just things just escalated where like there was like on like threats going on that like, you know, I'm going to do this to you at school, blah blah blah. So I transitioned and we changed schools like in the midway of my 8th grade year before I finished 8th grade to like a smaller school in Denver. I ended up finishing with like 26 kids in my graduating class, but then my dad at the time was working in Colorado, a school called Regis Jesuit High School. And so they were opening up the girls division. I was going to be the first class. And I was like, literally the last thing I want to do is be in an all-girl environment after experiencing that. But that was not up for negotiation. So my parents were like, you will be going to an all-girls school. And I remember just being like terrified. I was like, all my friends are guys. You know, I was like, I don't know how to get along with girls. And what's so funny is like, after meeting a lot of the girls, even at Regis from our year, like so many of us were like that. We're like, I'm a girls guy. Like, but we all came together. And I think like, I was really fortunate in high school to be in an all-girl environment. Like, you know, after like the shock and trauma and stress of thinking it was going to be middle school all over again. I think like removing the boy dynamic, especially at that age, like we all came together and it was like, we like went to summer camp for 4 years of high school. We are still like some of my very, very best friends I talk to literally every day from high school. And I think like I was really fortunate to be in especially like an all female environment, I think growing up, because it just gave us like so much confidence and like just so much and just a safe place to like talk about our opinions, like learn to think critically, like learn to how to share and like be nice to each other, like things that kids have to learn anyways, but in a way that I think a lot of women especially don't have those kinds of opportunities because society in general always kind of pits women against each other and like they make us compete, you know, if it's not.
So do you think having a high school experience where you're with the boys division, you know, if it's just a normal high school, you think that
I think the
has a big
dynamic would have
effect?
been different. Yeah, I think that people's just behavior is, like, especially kids. Like, I think
Yeah.
kids' behavior is very different when you feel like you're like, even if you have like a crush on a guy or something like that, or if you feel like that like guys are like watching you or judging you if you know the answer in class. Like, I just think that like, you know, sometimes, especially at that age, girls and women just behave differently. And we gave no dams in high school. Not one dam was given.
Was this down at the campus it's at now?
Yeah, yeah. And I guess it's a little bit more integrated now, which of course, like my like
You're like, of
empowered
course it
woman is like, you're breaking tradition, but like, you know, I mean, it's for the best. You know, things evolve and progress. That's the way life goes. But I think, really fortunate to be in an environment where like I was just around a lot of supportive women growing up.
What you were coaching down there?
Yes.
Is that right?
He taught at the
Track.
boys' school.
You taught there?
Yes, I taught mathematics and
Oh, geez.
coached track and field.
Math.
I'm not as dumb as I look, Tom.
No, I'm just saying. So my son's upstairs and he's working on math. So you
might need some help.
Yeah, you help
Yeah.
him out because I'm
He can't.
working on algebra right now and what is it like simplifying equations
Oh,
on both
geez.
sides and it's taking me back and it's not
You
good.
can do it, Tom.
No, he
There's
can't.
a YouTube video for that.
That
now.
is true. That is true.
Was your intention to give her that level of support? Like, hey, I know what's best for you. We're going to get you into this all-girls school. Or were you like, I just want you close to me so I can keep an eye on you?
Craig, let me tell you, I was in education for 40 years and started to get real disappointed in our public school system in the late 70s, early 80s. I could see what was happening. Discipline became a dirty word. I came to the realization that they didn't want teachers anymore. I don't know if you guys grew up with the
My mom taught in DPS for 30 years.
Oh,
So
then she'd know what I'm
She knows
talking
exactly,
about.
yeah.
Because a teacher, when I started teaching, was a teacher. You didn't just teach your discipline, you know, your mathematics or your science or history. You taught them about everything. Hey, young man, the word is, you know, and you'd help them, and even with little things. But now what I see is they don't want teachers; they want an instructor. You just teach your subject matter, and that's it. You don't need to talk to the kid about, you know, being nice to his parents or this and that. So it really bothered me. So I knew
Plus,
once I
couldn't
got
beat
the
up the
job
kids anymore. Just kidding. I'm just
at
teasing you.
Regis that that's where I wanted them to go.
we respond over there every now and then. And I always turn around every time when we're driving away. You know, it's whether it's a fire alarm or something, but that is the only school that I've ever been in that the students hold the door for us.
Oh, really?
And like, say good morning.
Good morning, thank you.
You mean the girl school, right?
Well,
You're like,
actually,
We'll throw shade on
definitely
the
not.
it's impressive, and we know a couple of firefighters on our job. They have kids that go there, and one of the dads said the reason I sent my kid there is because it's different.
Yeah.
A Regis kid is different, and I'm sure that everybody has their opinions on because it does cost. It's a private
Oh.
school. It costs money to go there.
That's why my
But
my
it
parents
is
are like,
different.
You guys
I
have
mean,
jobs here, right?
Yeah, it is different. The kids are different there. There has to be. You can tell that there has to be some level of standard being held by the teachers there. Like this, there is an expectation there.
And the standard is held there for the parent also.
That's great.
And in the public schools, it wasn't that way.
Well,
Usually,
parents are kind of ruling it now.
Yeah.
They're unhappy.
yeah.
They complain.
yeah.
Changes are made.
And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I got in trouble at school, it didn't matter if I was right or not. I was wrong,
Yeah.
according to my
Yeah.
parents.
And you didn't want to go home because it was going to be worse.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think we can turn that? And we're jumping ship, but I'm curious. Do you think we can turn that ship around, or are we too far gone?
It all starts in the home from the moment those kids are eligible to be educated. If you don't have a concerned parent, and you know what, I disagree. You don't have to have both parents. There are a lot of kids who grew up with one parent, their mother or their father, that did fine. Now, I definitely think it's far more important to have a mom and a dad than just one or the other. But it can be done. What's got to change is society's idea of what's right and what's wrong. When we were kids, the adults were always right and we were wrong. And nowadays it's so funny because the kid can be completely out of line. You guys will like this. I had to discipline some kid. I drug him into the office. I wasn't very nice about it and wanted some stuff done right away because this kid was always in trouble. And I was told, this would have been about 1981, Mr. Henderson, this kid has due process. What the hell's due process? This kid's a jerk. And had no clue what due process was. And then when I found out, that, hey, he has a right to tell you his story and this and that. And I'm thinking, God, I wish my dad would have heard of this. I wish I would have had due process. The only due process I got was the process of getting a good spanking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that due process is not retroactive. I don't think.
But to answer your question, I went around. I think it will change. I think it can change. I don't know if it's going to change a lot in our public schools, but as you guys are well aware, the kids or the parents and kids are leaving our public schools. They had to close 16 schools in Jefferson
I
County.
saw that. Yeah.
16 schools are closing because parents are beginning to realize our public schools, we've just, we've made them a mess.
You do a lot of work overseas, right?
Yeah.
It-
yeah.
And how do you see the way that we're dealing with our school system with the way that other countries are kind of dealing with theirs?
I mean, I feel like I've done a ton of track meets and stuff overseas, and like those are definitely, I don't know, I guess it's like a mix. Like a lot of my like developed country stuff, I'm trying to find a good way to answer this here because the US is such an enigma, right? Like we have our population size and like our like middle to upper class like population in comparison to like the total population is so different from so many different countries. But you see basically like generally speaking, like you see a lot of kids, like if they have the resources, they go to private school systems, like pretty much out the gates, or their public school systems still like require that parents pay like a tuition that's similar. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, our systems are so different. Like I've done so much stuff for like disability and like disabled sport infrastructure in countries like Peru. I'm going to Tanzania, and so like that'll be a sport exchange at an all-girls school there. But I think like one, like the US is amazing because we have access to education, like first and foremost, because like even in countries where you would have to pay for a public school education, whatever that is, like a lot of times you pay through taxes. Like in Argentina, universities are free and like the schooling is free. But again, it's like arguable, jury's still out on like the quality and like, a lot of it is self-driven, but a lot of that also like comes from the cultures that we have. Kind of like my dad said, like what are the conversations that you're having at home? Like how are you raising a person to be? Are they assertive enough? If they're thrown into a 200-person lecture class for university, even if it's free, are they going to actually survive? Or is your kid the kind of kid that needs to be like in a 10-person Socratic seminar, kind of more like hands-on type thing? So I think the US like not only provides access, but has such a variety of different experiences that we can it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, right? Like you have opportunities here that would not otherwise be available in a lot of other places. But I do think, like, again, like there are still places and areas in the United States where, like, even though there's access to a public education, like it's not going to be the thing that like can necessarily lift somebody out of like being in a impoverished area, right? It's not going to lift somebody out of poverty. Like I think
Lace,
that
I
we have
don't
such
mean to
opposite politics. I'm so excited.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but what was when you were in New Delhi? Did all girls have a right to an education?
No, God. Well, especially not the Indian people. Like the people that had wealth and access all went to the American schools and the embassy, or they went to a British school. Period.
Man, it's got to be like pretty tough to see because you go over there for to try and get their like disabled programs up, or what's your
It's a variety of stuff.
sorry.
I'll have
That's all
I'm
right.
like I can show my dad how to turn his phone on Do Not Disturb. Do you want me to turn on Do Not Disturb for you? Okay.
Hey,
He's like, disturb me.
Don't disturb
Maybe it's
me.
important.
Yeah,
What do
it
you
could be
got going
something
on?
super
It's
important.
never important. It's just our cousins wanting to talk about football. I mean, yeah, so like my stuff is transition. I've done like a lot of competing overseas, and then yeah, now I've just gotten a lot more like sport envoy opportunities with the State Department to go over and like basically it's a variety of stuff. Like when we were in Peru, it was talking to like some of their local municipalities on like like what disabled sport does, like how it would elevate the community, even elevate non-disabled people. But again, like so much of this is like structural and systemic. And I know my dad's like trying not to roll his eyes, but even like you said, like India has so many problems that like of course the women are going to school because like there's also like social and cultural problems where like a lot of women are getting married at 12 like instead of going to school. So I think like it would be lovely if it was just like a one issue, right? If it was just the schools, it was just the education program. And I don't think necessarily like the US is very different, but like we have like a richness and availability and access that a lot of other places don't have. But that's not to say that it isn't necessarily like diminishing in value or quality, as somebody else's opinion might be.
I'm with you, TJ. I think it 100% starts in the home.
Yeah.
You know, like I think you could honestly, aside from the social pressures that and kids that are mean and idiots, as far as an education and respecting like your teachers and getting through, you know, secondary schooling, all that stuff. If your parents are setting you up and this is the expectation, this is what we're doing, and they help out at home, you know, when you're having problems, I think that makes a huge difference rather than the minute you come home and you're complaining about something that went wrong with administration or teachers or whatever, and the parents go, that's it, I'm setting up a meeting. That's it. You know, we're going to go talk to your teacher and straighten this out. You know, if there's no support,
You're exactly
I
right.
mean, that's
Sure.
the problem.
You're exactly right. Yeah.
Uh,
I used to enjoy the parent teacher conferences. Oh man,
All right, give us some stories. What are some good ones?
For the most part, if you had a shitty kid, did they have shitty parents?
I would say
What was the ratio? 1-to-1 shitty kid, shitty parent, or
99% of the time. And yet that 1%, the parents did everything right. And the kid was just a jerk, you know. But a lot of that has to do. I tell parents at the parent teacher conferences, especially incoming, the ninth graders when they come to high school, I tell the parents, make sure that you're aware of who your kids are hanging out with. That had so much to do with it. The type of friends that they chose. I had a young girl, she was in an honors geometry class, ninth grader, very sharp, smart, neat little gal. And her neighbor, she would walk to and from school with her neighbor, and her neighbor was a year or two older, and she hung out in the smoking area at the school. And she
nice.
was kind
Love
of
the 80s.
At the smoking area.
Smoking area in high
kind of
school.
a hardcore girl. Well, this is who this young gal, who was an honors student in an honors program, was hanging out with. And next thing you know, she was going from A's to B's to C's. And her parents were asking me, what can we do? And I said, well, one thing, because I would go for a run every lunch hour, and I'd run past the smoking area just to see who the hell was out there and if any of my athletes were there. And I would always see her, and I could tell that. So it's important to know as a parent who your kids are hanging out with. And
Peer groups, everything.
For
I mean, it
sure.
doesn't even change. We talk about it. You're an adult, and you're the sum of your 5 probably closest people you hang out with. It doesn't change when you're a kid. It's
Yeah.
just it's probably bigger because
Well, you're more-
friendships are less pure. They're actually less genuine. So there's more of them. They don't mean as much, but
Well, and you're such a vulnerable, like very influential stage of life too. That's the thing that you start setting foundations that like may or may not be
yeah.
conducive to your development later on in life.
Well, we were talking with Larry Hagner. He runs the Dad Edge project and podcast. He came on yesterday, and he told us a story about his 14-year-old son who shoplifted. And once he finally got down to the cause of it, it turned out his kid didn't want to lose another friend and succumb to peer pressure because the bad kid was doing
Absolutely.
something. And it's like, Dad, I've lost a lot of friends, and I just didn't want to lose another one. And so, but it still comes down to who are you hanging out with?
But you asked me, one of you asked me earlier, will it change? I think you asked me. And I said, it's societal. Think about this for a moment. We just passed, Colorado was the first state to pass legalized marijuana. I remember when there was a big push to eliminate smokers. Some of the poor people that were smoking, they were outcasts. They didn't feel like they were welcome anywhere, because we wanted to, make it a healthier environment. But we passed legalized marijuana. I know that marijuana is a starting point for a lot of kids, and when I say it's a societal issue, we've got to come to grips with some of the decisions that we make.
Yeah, I think I love that quote, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." And
Point.
I mean I think that goes to when you're a kid, when you're an adult. Like take your situation. If you are not around your family, a very strong base, I mean, who knows where your life could have led,
Yeah.
and probably not to the Olympics,
Yeah.
So my kids are still young. They don't have any friends yet. I'm happy to be there.
You're gonna be their best
You're
friend
their
for
only
life.
friend. Right.
I'm your only friend.
Well, like how cool is this?
That
You
is
know, like
true.
to have
My dad's my friend.
yeah, like I think that's so rad.
He was not my friend though. He told me earlier. After we had some conversation, he was like, "When my kids were growing up, I was not their friend," and I'm like, "That's true. Actually, you were not my friend for a long time."
So is that by design? I mean, I agree with that. You were there to show them the way and make sure that they can, leave the house at a certain age and they'll be prepared. And being their friend is probably not what they need. But I think now that she's an adult, like that's something I aspire to be when my kids grow up. I want it to go from father-son or father-daughter to a really close friendship.
I think it's important that your kids know that you love them and care for them. But I'm a parent. I'm not your best friend. And I am your best friend when it comes to need. But I also need to show you what's right and what's wrong in life. I just see these parents, certain parents that want to be their kid's best friend. And so many times I've seen on TV where they bust up a big party and it's the parent that provided the alcohol and stuff like that. And it's like, what in the hell are you thinking? You're the kid's parent. You're not his best friend. And that's a hard thing to talk about because you want to be their best friend, but you also want to do what's best for them. And in many cases, being their best friend isn't the best thing for them.
I think it's hard for a parent to hear, though. One thing that I think causes that is parents. I mean, do you ever tell your dad you hated him? ever?
I think my dad would have literally Hadoukened me out of the house if I said I hate you.
The old high
But I mean, a
both
lot of
legs.
a lot of ki- a lot of kids
He's like, you would not have a face.
a lot of kids say mean things to their parents, right?
Oh yeah.
And the parents, instead of maybe drawing the line there, it makes them feel bad, and they don't want to feel like their kid hates them. When in fact, maybe it's a respect thing, and not, it's like, well, maybe if there was a little bit more respect there or trust there, that wouldn't come out. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, psychology, right?
Yeah, I know.
There's
Well, I
so
think-
much going on in kids as they grow up.
It's
But
so hard. Well, and kids nowadays are so much smarter. So there's the Flynn effect is the effect where like every generation like that passes, my dad would disagree with this, but it's a real theory. That every new generation, like the kids are a couple IQ points smarter than the previous generation. So like kids,
I agree with that.
kids are smart. Kids are smart as hell. Nice. I was like waiting for it to be
Crushed
like,
it.
not you though, Lacey. You're not smarter than me. But like, kids are still kids at the end of the day. Even if they're intelligent, like you need to have something like consistent again, like to build the foundation to be an adult. And I think like parents, you have to have like enough congruency in yourself to be able to have like the perception when your kid is lashing out to be like, this is like my dad did a good job. And I think because he was a teacher for so long, where he's like, you're still a little ass kid. Like you're just dumb. And like, it's not your fault. But it's because you have a little kid brain still, like your brain's still developing. So like when a kid's lashing out or behaving in a certain way, again, to like have that perspective. And it's easy for me to say because this is all theoretical. I work with like athletes, but I'm not a parent. But to like remember that like in perspective, this child's brain is still trying to like learn systems, like evolve, like become an adult. But you are the adult, so you need to be the one that's more of like the steady rock inside of it, like a storm of turmoil, and be kind of something more consistent.
When it's just kind of switching gears just a little bit, but my sister, her kids play softball, and they are at a tournament or a game every single day after school, every single weekend. When it comes to their development and like how healthy is that for our kid? Is that bad?
I was like, you're gonna blast us, but
Oh no, but I mean,
happy to answer.
yeah, like are we messing them up?
No, okay. I think kids are very durable and resilient. I think my dad dropped my brother a couple times as an infant. He's just okay. He's not great, but he's just okay.
No superpowers?
He can breathe on his own. But I actually like am interested in hearing my dad's opinion. I'm a very big fan of like multi-sport. Like I think sometimes when you do club sports specific, and I'm like, this is a tough crowd to be saying this, but when you are like involving kids very early in a very formalized and like elite sport environment, yes, there are things that they learn. Like the percentage of an athlete, especially like softball though, like of going from like a middle school, high school team to becoming a professional athlete with contracts is like less than 2% in the US. Yet we invest so much money, so much time, so much effort because we care, and because you do it because you care about your kid. You're not just like be a prodigy. Like this isn't like China, you're like you don't have to like learn like be a prodigal violin player by 6. But I think sometimes like embracing multitudes and like adding variety of sport more than just like single sport, like very formalized training, very early strength and conditioning, like all this stuff. Like I think one that puts a lot of emotional pressure on your kid too, because just like almost instinctually it feels transactional, right? Your parents are like, I'm investing in you, so like you need to do this. And so like that's a lot of pressure I think to put on a kid. But then too, like I don't know, I was really fortunate that like I played a lot of sports before I ran track, and like I never would have thought that I would do track for this long or at this level. But I learned a lot from different disciplines that have all contributed to this. But I mean, I'm interested in knowing what my dad thinks about that.
I think we over-organize things for kids.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, I learned to play baseball in a field with the neighbor kids. I learned a lot of skills in the street, just playing and climbing trees and throwing rocks and having dirt cloud fights. And there was no organized sports except baseball when I was a kid.
Now you're talking.
And that's right. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed Little League Baseball. But what I see today is I see parents that just what Lacey said, boy, they invest all this money. They're sending their kids to every camp and this and that. And if you look around, especially in today's professional sports, a lot of these kids never had any organized sports as a young kid. I take our inner city kids, boy. You go in East St. Louis, go down L.A. at night. You'll see kids playing basketball with 10 other guys all night long, and I mean they develop some stuff that.
So is it not?
Yeah.
I mean, you take a look at that, and those kids are probably playing every night, all the time. They're doing as much as some of these kids in the organized sport. But is it more than it's by kids' choice?
And well, and I think
rather
it's like,
than organized by
economically, I'm sure that they didn't have a choice.
Yeah,
but
right.
it's also, I think, like what it comes down to, like what you said earlier, like it's playtime. Like kids should play, you know. And I think like we see it again, like you see it a lot with musicians with kids. Like there's a lot of clubs you can put your kid in, but I think like kids should play. Like at the end of the day, it should be playful, fun playtime.
Well, Lacey hears me say this all the time. I hate the term burnout. As a kid, how the hell could you be burned out of anything as a kid?
Yeah.
And it's not, to me, it's not burnout. It's the fact that it's no longer fun. And when it gets to be no longer fun for a kid, you know, that's it. They're done. Their interest is gone. They're not going to want to learn more. They're not going to want to do extra to get better because it's not fun.
Yeah.
What's
Well, even
your,
as adults, I'm 33,
Great
and I'm
point.
like, when long jump's not fun anymore, I'm done, dude. Like, why?
well, I guess like something that I see myself struggling with is like when my kids want to quit. And like I have a very, like I pride myself on my ability to be mentally tough and get through things. And then I guess when is it okay to say, yeah, you want to quit? Go ahead. Like how do you deal with that as a parent?
Yeah, that's really great because you feel the same way I do. First of all, you never quit anything.
Right.
You know? Hey, if you're going to start something, you're going to finish it. So I'm really glad to hear you say that because it is difficult. You don't want your kids to quit, you know, no matter what they start. Hey, at least get through it. You know, next year you don't have to go out or this and that. But when it comes to sports, you've got that every kid and their parent need to be disciplined somewhat. The kid needs to be disciplined into the point where he knows, yeah, I've got to practice every day. I can't miss practice. I got to be on time. And the parent's got to be disciplined enough to know, you know what? That's the coach. You just do what he says. And what I see a lot of, especially Little League, and it's not just baseball, it's Little League football, Little League soccer, the parent's on the sideline coaching the kid when he comes off, you know, telling you got to be as disciplined as we expect the kid to be, I think.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, and going back to Craig, your thing on quitting, I don't know if that's what you were saying, TJ, of hey, get through the season. That's my thing, is especially with sport. It's okay. Yeah, you're not having fun this year, whether it's players, whether it's coach, whether it's you just don't like the sport anymore. You still made a commitment to a team, and that's like a lifelong lesson.
Yeah.
When you're on a team, you don't bail on the team, especially mid-season.
I agree. 100%.
Well, and just even in like non-team sports, like I think there's so much value in like in having kids learn about commitments. And like again, it's like when you start a sport too, like I mean, like sometimes it's like sometimes you want to have a goal, at least to like be the reminder of what the commitment is. But sometimes it's like just you wanted to play that sport, but you committed to it, and that's just how like life works. Is when you commit to something, you just got to ride it out.
Why is it most parents all think, especially those that really invest in their kid, that they're going to be all Americans or they're going to make it?
I love
Major
some
League
unbridled
Baseball?
optimism.
You know, it's amazing because there are kids that I tell Lacey this all the time. She gets mad at me because she thinks I'm not very politically correct.
Or just mean.
You know, son, there is a chess team at your school. You know, they come out for a sport and they have absolutely no athletic ability. I think it's important also for parents to take a good look at the coach. There are a lot of bad coaches out there. There are coaches out there for themselves, not for those kids. And I've seen tons of that, tons of it.
I think the reason that people think that their kids are just going to be absolutely incredible is because I think you want them to be that way. But I also think that some parents, they're like, well, this kid's an extension of me. I'm clearly awesome. So like, why,
Why can't I make it?
No, like their egos are so big because it's been a long time since they played, their high school, hey, I could have went all pro if, I didn't blow my knee out or whatever. Like they still have that. And now they're going to put that on their kids.
I think it's the same social pressure that was on those parents when they were younger.
To be successful.
For sure.
Just how you're viewed by your peers. Now you're in this other peer group where you're on the sideline with the parents or wherever you're watching in the stands.
Oh yeah, we should get into parent culture.
And
I'm
who
so
wants to
interested in this.
be, that's my kid. That's my kid. He just hit the winning shot. That's my kid. He just signed he committed to D1, and it's tough. It's tough being a parent because you want your kid.
Yes.
You do want your kid to be successful. You want to see them. I mean, I've seen my kid have a walk-off hit, They smile ear to ear,
Absolutely.
when they have a great game, they love it, but you have to separate yourself as a parent and just know that, TJ, you could attest to this, sure. How many times have we all failed on our own and learned so much from the losses and so much from like the coach that maybe didn't do it right to us, You learn like what a good coach is, what you're looking for, and you learn how to get through that stuff.
Well, to answer Craig, your question, what happens a lot with Little League? These kids are really good when they were, let's say, 10, 11, and 12 years old. They were probably the star of their team. Then all of a sudden they get to high school, and some of these other kids that weren't very good, they start to mature, they get better, and the next thing you know, all of a sudden that star is now just a regular athlete.
And they didn't have to work for the years when they were younger.
Who do you think the parent blames for that kid not being the star anymore?
Coach.
Well, or worse yet, they start coming down on their kid. Because,
Yes.
And saying, you aren't, what's going on? Like, you're not, and it's, hey, the kid just blew, more than likely, with a lot of them, they just were so athletic, so much more athletically talented at a younger age.
Yes.
That gave them that separation. And some of these kids that weren't there, they had to work hard, and they've learned that work ethic. And then you get to high school, which is where a lot of it happens. That was my situation. I was 5'8" freshman year, maybe 5'11" sophomore, and then by the time I was a senior, I was 6'4".
Wow.
And things changed. It caught up to everybody that was better than me. And these kids, but I knew how to work. So in order to keep playing that sport, when I didn't have as much physical ability, I had to work. So then when that more or less God-given talent started to come back into play and I hit puberty, then it was like, I've got the upper hand because now I know how to work and I have some tools.
That's why I said earlier, I think it's important for all parents to really know what kind of coaching their kid is getting and what kind of person that coach is.
Yeah.
Because I feel as a coach, I'm not here just to make you a better ball player or a better track runner, or I'm also here to make you a better person. How to lose gracefully, which I don't believe in losing gracefully.
Oh, it's like,
Hell no.
yeah.
I'm
one
going
came
to
to
teach
lose.
you how. I'm going
There's
to
gotta be
teach
a
you how
loser.
to do it. And how to be a good sport, and how to appreciate the fact that you just got beat by somebody who was better than you. So instead of us crying or making excuses, let's go back to practice now, work hard, and get as good as they are.
That is true. We had a really cool training group this year. We were a mix of Olympic level and Paralympic athletes, and one of our training partners, Richard Brown, he's a world record holder for a Paralympics and below the knee class. He runs a 10.5 100 meter, so it's very fast. He's very, very talented.
I
And
couldn't do that on a bike.
he probably not. Yeah, probably. He's so talented, but he had like a practice one day because he wants to do decathlon now because he's built like a decathlete too. But he had a hard day at the track and like he was pouting about it. And he told me, I talked to him recently, I think I was telling you, he was like, your dad gave me that talk and I think about it every day now. And I really needed that because he was real pouty at around 300s, which is objectively a hard workout. Like it's just a painful workout. My dad went over and I guess, I mean, you're the one that told him, but he was like, you cannot keep relying on your talent because Richard's talented. He has the right parents, the right genetics. But Richard that's what he said. My dad was like, you haven't had to work for it. He's like, if you want to be the like undisputed best and you want to do something difficult, you have to do difficult things. And that was Richard's like,
That's
I think
what
about
a coach
that.
should do.
He's like, I think about that conversation every day now.
You guys as parents will like this. I had over 50 state champions in track and field. And of those 50, I would say 45 or more, maybe. 45 of those weren't the best kid out there, but they were the toughest, most determined, hardworking kids. I had a lot of athletes that should have been state champions because they did just what Lacey's talking about with Richard Brown. They had all the talent, everything, but it always came easy for them, so they didn't have to work for it. When all of a sudden they're finding out there are guys out there that are just as good as I am, and they work harder, it just really disappointed me when I knew I had a kid. He'd come in, as a sophomore or something, and I'm thinking, man, this kid's got it. We're going to have some fun the next couple of years because he's the best there is out there. I had an athlete named Vernon Massey. Unbelievable. Full ride, Division I to anywhere he wanted. He ended up at Nebraska. And it was all natural. Every bit of it was natural. And there were a lot of kids that could have been just like him, but they didn't have the work ethic. They didn't have the determination it takes. So those 45 kids that were state champions, they all had one thing in common. They were determined to get better.
What were their parents like? So I bring this up. Of these 45 that were state champion, by and large, because we Matt, who I coach with, who you've met, Lacey, he's on this Facebook group of minor league, major league players, and he put this poll together of so these are all guys that are playing professionally. So they're either playing AA, AAA, or they actually made it. And puts this poll out and said, when you were playing Little League, what did your parents do? And the options were, sat in right field and partied their ass off, didn't say a word.
I didn't know that was an option.
Oh, yeah, it's an option.
Oh, my
That
kids
was
are
at the bottom
definitely.
of the list.
Yeah.
Can't wait to play baseball.
My dad coached me, or my dad sat behind and yelled at the parents, blah, blah, blah. And overwhelmingly, I'd say 75%, like the parents really actually just sat back, but hardly ever did any of these high-level athletes have parents that were out of line, yelling at umpires, yelling at coaches.
Yep.
Most of them just sat and watched. And I'm curious if, you probably, all these state champions, their
They
parents.
did what I said earlier. They let the coach.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson.
But
They weren't yelling
don't
at the
get
coach,
me
yelling
wrong.
at the USATF official.
Don't get me wrong. These kids that became state champions, they had above average ability.
Sure.
They had but they weren't the best out there. But they had the work ethic, and they had the determination, the heart, the desire. And I just felt so bad for those parents that did have the kid that should have been the state champion and never made it. It's like, man, that's the kid that should be on the podium. But he just didn't have what it takes. He had everything physically that it took, and the genetically that it took, but there's more to it, especially today. In today's, you got to have heart, boy. You got to have heart.
Well, your daughter definitely has it.
Oh, yeah, I give her that. Because
I got the wrong parents. I got the wrong genetics.
I know this offends her when I say this all the time, but she's really not that good of an athlete.
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
She's not that good of an athlete.
You know, she went to the Olympics, right?
But I will tell you
Made
this.
finals. He's like,
You'll
in finals.
you'll be hard pressed to find somebody with the determination she has, the guts, the willpower, and
Yeah, that's what makes you proud more than anything, I'm sure.
Yeah, it really
you know?
does.
That's
it really
awesome.
Thanks, Dad.
because
No, I was a non-athletic kid. I'm not coordinated. We've been playing tennis in the off season, and God, I'm terrible. I suck really bad at that. But
Craig's
I got a good attitude.
Craig's father-in-law played us in tennis this last March. No, he's good.
Yeah, if you want to talk
He's
about
older. How old are you, TJ?
77.
How old's Bob?
72,
72.
70, yeah, around there. And I tell you what,
It's
you want to talk
impressive.
about a man who's just good at absolutely everything.
You and Bob need to have a beer because you guys will hit it off.
I like beer too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He does like beer.
Yeah.
So here's a good story. This is my favorite Bob story.
Okay.
So
Now, who is this guy?
it's my father-in-law.
Oh yeah.
And he actually coaches with Matt and I.
Oh, nice.
Oh
So
wow.
he's a baseball guy too.
Coach
So
vibes.
he coached me in Little League. His wife, my mother-in-law, was my librarian. So I've known him and have been intimidated by him my entire life and continue to be because he's good at absolutely everything he does. And he's just, he has a presence, like yourself. Like when you walk into a room, you're like, oh, dude's a stud. So it's the weekend that I'm going to ask for their permission to propose to my now wife. And he's like, we're on the beach. He's like, hey, you want to play some catch? I was like,
He's,
sure.
like, throwing extra hard.
This will be good.
So he pitched for a AAA team for the Reds. And I'm not good at sports. I'm not a sports person. It is not it's just not my thing. And so I can catch a ball. I'm like coordinated enough, but I didn't play at any sort of level. So I'm catching
There's no
these.
contract involved when
No. So I'm catching these balls and I'm like, ooh, man,
Yeah.
and they keep increasingly getting harder and harder.
So this is the day you were asking for her hand?
This is the weekend.
Oh, so this is the test.
This is the test, and he just keeps firing them harder and harder, and you can see this little smirk in the corner of his mouth, and I keep catching him, but god damn, I think he maybe gave me 50.
You're like, and then when I went to the
50%.
emergency room afterwards,
Yeah.
he said it was okay.
50%. But yeah, anything he touches, he absolutely
He works
crushes.
hard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what it all comes back to is having.
I'm like, have you said anything to him since then? I'm like, I need to know what happened at the end of the story.
Oh,
Broke
I
your
mean,
finger.
no, I think I made some excuse what, I'm gonna take a dip, get a little warm, cool off for a little bit. But no, I mean, they were incredibly gracious, and obviously here we are many years later. But yeah, I think
My dad's getting ideas now for ways he can intimidate my boyfriend. Now he's like, ooh,
No,
throw the baseball real hard at him.
you should do that.
Yeah, what's
No, Josh is great. He would never. Josh would throw. My boyfriend's one of those very, very athletic people, but didn't really have the want or desire. He's very talented.
Yeah, I think you
Yeah.
are. I bet you could be.
I'm one of those.
You caught the ball. That's all that matters.
Yeah, something like that. As I winced in pain.
Yeah, just tears streaming.
Yeah,
down.
tears streaming down my face. No, I think I was one of the kids who just never found that thing that they were passionate about growing up, and then I've only found it recently with endurance sports.
Oh, cool.
So that's
Oh, this makes sense now with the Iron Man.
well,
Okay.
it's one of those things that takes a zero skill. Endurance sports takes no skill at all. So all it takes is time
work ethic.
and work ethic, right? So I think but the mentality of those types of people and the people that you surround yourselves with, I think is similar. A lot of nut jobs in endurance athletes.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
Oh,
You know what? You should.
That is true.
the distance runners, they used to amaze me. It's like you can't
Never
hurt.
met a group of
couldn't
masochists
hurt
like
'em.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They would die before they could be pestering you and you could just pummel them.
We hit.
But it
Jesus.
didn't matter because they could take it. And
They're like, just it's fine, coach. Just let it out.
We just did a 100-mile run, and there was a 80-year-old and she had done it 6 or 7 times in a row. I mean,
Ultra marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so I think that level of intensity and mental strength just never goes away. And I think it just keeps getting.
Well, and it also goes to show, like, isn't it amazing, like, what you can make your body do if you have, like, the correct drive and, like, the correct will, you know, if everything lines up and you're like, all right, let's push it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Let's
just,
see.
it goes back to like you telling your brain who's in charge,
Mhm.
and it's not your body. You know, like
I
it's.
think I've heard that a couple times.
I that was one of my favorite things I would tell kids, especially the distance runners. You know, let your mind control your body. Don't let your body control your mind, because your body is weak, but your mind is strong.
Yeah, 100%.
Oof! I just got chills. I think I should have
I
met
can't
you a
wait to
long
go run
time
100
ago.
miles
Yeah,
now.
Not anymore. No, there were some interesting folks out there. There was someone who had a trach.
Wow, yeah.
She ran. Yeah, I don't think she finished, but I mean, even to try and
Even to look at your name on a piece of paper that says 100 miles.
totally right. Like
You ran a marathon or 2, Dad?
I ran 2.
you look like you're begrudgingly saying that.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah,
Doesn't look like you want to do it again.
never.
Yeah.
No, those people are masochists. You know, I heard about this wall at 20 miles. They're right. and it's not just a wall, it's got nails and spikes in it, and it's miserable. It's the most ungodly thing I've ever done in my life. That takes and what really bothered me, and I'm not a sexist, but to get beat by some little old lady that had gray hair, and I was like in my 30s or 40s, and just walking and just
So I was running a half marathon. This was probably, this had to be over 10 years ago. Denver, you know, and I get past, this was probably like mile 10. I get passed by somebody in a tutu, juggling at the same time.
Not juggling for 10
And I
miles.
did pass him in the end, but I was like, oh man, this is bad. And I was running an okay race, you know, but just not.
Makes you really
not-
question
It's like
things
it
when you
was.
do
I was
something
kind of like,
that.
you know, really, guy, really, this you got to come out here juggling. You could be running a lot faster if you weren't juggling.
Going backwards.
Yeah. So I've had that.
Speaking of, the marathon world record was just broken. Has anybody ever landed?
Is that the one that-
2 hours 1 minute?
2:01:09, Dad. Yeah.
I saw.
I saw those splits,
He is-
14:30s. I was like,
Can you
He is
imagine?
5K?
he is unreal.
Yeah.
He's unbelievable. Have you seen
So-
the documentary?
And I like that he's older too.
I thought he
was
did
like,
break
he
the
calls
2 hour, but it didn't count.
Yeah, so it was
He had the Nike shoes, right? Was it the Shoegate? thing?
vapors. So did you see his documentary on when he broke the 2-hour marathon?
No.
It is fascinating. It didn't count, but he just wanted to see if he could do it. And so it was an unsanctioned race.
Yeah.
They found, I want to say it was in Italy, but it was
It's like a
basically
downhill.
it was a flat because it was
Okay, yeah.
basically like a lollipop on both ends.
Okay.
And so he would do laps super flat, and he had pacers running in a specific like to break the wind for him. And yeah, he ended up breaking the
That's a-
2
I
hour.
do remember seeing that he broke 2 hours, but I did know that it like something happened and wasn't sanctioned, so it wasn't official.
People listening to this podcast may not understand what breaking 2 hours.
That's true.
What breaking 3 hours.
I can barely do anything for 2 hours.
For
First
an
of all,
ordinary
firstly and foremost.
person.
Even reading, you're like, nope, too long.
Yeah, I'm out.
Exactly, too hard.
I mean, that's 26.2 miles, and in breaking 3 is phenomenal.
So do you think it'll be like when the 4-minute mile got broke, where it just stood so long, and then it breaks, and now it can be broken all the time? That when this 2 hour marathon time gets broke, then that's going to change things.
I think so.
I definitely do.
Yeah.
I
I
definitely.
mean, 14:30 for 5K after.
But look
5K
at
after
the
5K.
difference.
Can you imagine?
What's going
No.
on today? I see a lot of athletes built like you, and they weren't built like
Use the
that.
term athlete with me loosely. You don't see me get out of bed. in
They
the
weren't
morning.
built like that when I was a kid. You know, most guys were about well, my size, bigger, I'm sure, but
He's like a
but
solid
at
5'10".
least I was in the same category. But nowadays they're like him. They're 6'4", 6'2".
It's disgusting.
Yeah, and they just have it. Today's matter of fact, our whole population is bigger and larger than it has been in centuries before. So yeah, and you'll see it just like the 10 flat 100 meters.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, because that phenomenon happens.
there were only a
across the
few
board.
people that could break 10 flat now. If you're not breaking 10 in the 100
I think
meters.
10:05 is the new standard for the non-disabled guys. The 100.
What about the Paralympic section? Are you seeing records get broken more often
Oh, yeah.
or more frequently?
Yeah, so especially like in the amputee classes, because we basically evolve too, like with what technology becomes available, but it's not unlike shoe technology too,
You still have to
But-
move the thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's still like a piece of equipment that like helps you do the thing, but like, you're the one doing it. But with para for sure, like I know for long jump especially, like there was really very few people that were jumping over 4 meters. Like it just wasn't like only like 1 or 2 girls, and then all of a sudden like I think it's like once we saw them kind of getting very comfortably in like mid 4 meters, like that's when kind of like everybody across the board exploded, and then it was impossible. 5 meters, impossible. And now those same 2 girls, guess what? 5-meter jumpers. So then you see like everybody's distances are now growing again, and that's just in my class, and that was huge in para. Like in Richard's class, like nobody was breaking 11 seconds. Like Oscar Pistorius went to the Olympics, and then he ran like a couple, maybe sub 11. I don't know who would have been the first one. But for a while, he was like the one to beat in para because then he was just dominating all the sprints. And I think a lot of that also was like, I don't know, like the mental aspect that he had to know he's running Olympic level speed and then could come back here and like he was the guy to beat. And then everybody started breaking the 11-second barrier in that class. So, yeah, I mean.
No different in baseball. Who just broke the 700?
Pujols.
Yeah, Pujols.
I just watched a document. You need to go home and watch this on Nolan Ryan. You would love it.
That's on my list.
Facing Nolan, it was awesome. He was ahead of, you want to talk about how athletes are getting bigger, faster, strong. Just the velocity that he threw at. There's a reason he has 1,000 more strikeouts than say Randy Johnson.
Yeah.
He would have had this a huge number of strikeouts even in today's game. And I think that's how ahead of time he was. Just all out beast. They said they clocked him at like 101 one time, and then they say, well, that was with old technology. With new technology, with the new technology, they would have had it at 107.
Damn.
107. And I don't know how much that is, but
Can you see a ball coming
27
at you at
years. Well,
107?
you look at this. You look at their
When
swings
was he
back
playing?
then.
Around what time?
So he had been 93. He retired. So like late 60s to 93.
Yeah.
No one was on the
Fair.
beach that day that Bob was throwing baseballs at me. But I think I could argue
Craig.
that he was faster than 107.
Oh man, it was impressive because you look at a lot of his strikeouts and the swings from professional baseball players looked horrible, like they didn't even see the ball.
Yeah.
Well,
they probably weren't even trained to see something come at them so fast. So I know nothing
Yeah.
about baseball. I would love to learn more. But I'm sure like pitching now probably has to be more average, closer to low 100, right?
Yeah, so most, when I would 20 years ago, it was you touch 90, you're doing something, 90, 92, 93, mid 90s, pretty good. And now it's 95 to 100.
Yeah,
man.
to be MLB, I'm
and
sure.
guys are throwing 104 in college. There's a Tennessee guy that's touching 104 and
Children. Those are still
but
children.
so you start thinking, well, how much of it is the early, I think a lot of it is more access to information, to be honest.
For sure.
So when 3-4 decades ago, I think probably for any sport, if you had a coach that was a high level performer, if you had somebody that knew what it took and the form and the technique, everything to teach that was huge, because you could have somebody that worked hard, but if they weren't getting the right information, they were just doing the wrong thing.
For sure.
And eventually they fizzle out. But that's why you see a lot of, for baseball, you see a lot of, Vlad Guerrero, his son plays. Ken Griffey Sr., his son
Right.
play.
Yeah.
These guys, Dante Bichette, his son's playing. A lot of these kids that are really good in today's game. Well, they had dads, and from day one. So when that 10,000 hour, mark starts, they're getting the right skill. They're getting taught the right way to do things that plays at the highest level.
Same thing with the Manning brothers.
100%, right? I mean, they were getting the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so much value too in. I've learned like there's so much value too in what's called vicarious experiences. So like once you see somebody break a record, once you see somebody break that 2-mile or the 2-hour mark, like if you've been training for it, you're a competitor, you're somebody like built the same, or you have similar training, like even just seeing vicarious experiences as somebody else does, like you're like, oh shit,
Why can't I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's amazing how good they are. I tell Lacey this story all the time. When you're young and you're a pretty good athlete, like I'm sure you were, you don't realize what the really good ones are like. 1966, I ran against Jim Ryan. Jim Ryan was the mile record holder in high school. The best, ran the fastest mile in the world in high school. So I ran against him in the 4x400. So we're lined up. He's third man.
The 400 is like just a full lap around.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm third man.
Which is impossible. I'm pretty
thinking,
sure.
I'm thinking, that's Jim Ryan. But this is the 400 meters.
It's a sprint.
This is no distance race. Actually thinking that I could,
got him.
beat him in 400 meters. He ran a 46-second 400 meters and blew my ass off the track. and I ran 400. I was a pole vaulter, but I could run a good 400 meters, and that's why I was. And I'm thinking, my God, no wonder this guy holds the world record. He can run 400 meters in 46 seconds. He could have been a quarter miler. I mean, he was that good.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Somebody just blew me away. Oh, well, when I went to the trials in '68, I'm telling my own dad, I said, Dad, if I really have a good meet and things go right, I might be able to make the team. I show up, there's 19 vaulters. They were all built like him.
Ugly.
Well, they weren't that ugly, but they weren't that ugly. But anyhow, they were all built like him, and I'm thinking, these guys are pretty big, but I think I'm faster. Oh God!
They were also much faster.
That was my first real dose of humility. Well, no, Jim Ryan gave me a good dose of that, but they were just bigger, stronger, faster. Their poles were, I looked like I was out there with a piece of spaghetti compared to what they had. It was just, you finally reach a point where you say, man, these guys are good.
You start to appreciate it, don't you?
Yeah, you realize and you appreciate the fact that, man, just like the NFL, oh my God, there's guys in the NFL that could blow guys that we have in the Olympic Games away in 100 meters. Hill from Kansas City Chiefs, he's got to be one of the fastest guys in the world.
Well, there are a lot of track guys that, once you learn how to run, like make turns and catch balls, like, then you got a chance, but that's hard.
But there's a huge difference between somebody that's good and then
the best.
there is.
One of my very best friends, he's an Australian long jumper. We trained together for years for Brees. He was selected because he's a fast guy. He used to be really fast to run the long jump. He was selected by Team Australia to do some exhibition race in Jamaica, and he did the 4x1, and his leg of the race was with Usain Bolt. In case you guys had him confused with Thomas Bolt or Jonathan Bolt, the track one.
The track one.
Yeah.
I think Craig's got him confused with the Disney movie Bolt.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's
that's
not
the
the
dog?
dog one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
bet
not the
he's
dog.
fast too, though.
Check.
Been watching
But
a lot of those.
I've heard he's fast. But no, and Fabrice, I remember watching that online, and I recorded it, and I even took a picture. So in the relays, like you've exchanged zones to make sure that still everything's on the up and up. Fabrice is fast and he is talented. He was a Diamond League champion in 2016. Like he's jumped over 8 meters consistent. Like he's very, very talented. But he also panicked in that time because he really thought he could beat Bolt for a second. And he ran out of the exchange zone, completely disqualified the entire team because that's what he was like, I'm going to do this. This is when I beat Bolt. And so even giving himself the head start in that race completely annihilates him within 2 to 3 steps of the 100-meter segment that he had.
Well, there's 300-pound linemen that for 10 to 15 meters can, I'll guarantee you, run every bit as fast as some of our top sprinters. But they can only do it for 10 or 15 meters.
Power,
but
baby.
they are
Yeah.
that quick. So it's hard to realize that there are people out there that are just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Well, and it's humbling too. I don't know. I'm kind of reaching the point in my career where like there's younger and younger people. They're so much taller than me. Their amputated legs are so much longer than mine, but I think being tall has helped. And I don't know.
The seven dwarfs are taller than
that's
you.
true. I mean, when they're stacked up. Just kidding. That's so not. But I don't know. I think it's humbling too to like think about how much you sucked in the beginning if you aren't necessarily inherently talented. Because there's a lot of people that do make the pro teams and the elite teams that do it off of hard work and like a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill. But then there are people that come in and you're like, wow, it took me 8 years to be able to jump what you jumped in your very first year on this circuit. So
Yeah, but it sounds like from our previous conversation that the people who have more grit than talent, they have better careers and better
it's definitely more
off-duty
sustainable.
life.
I think you have like more, because there's been a lot of people I see like blow up the track and then have it burn out, right? Because like it's not like being super, super talented is fun for a while, but there's always somebody better, younger, stronger. So like, how do you create something sustainable? And usually that's through like only learning resiliency the hard way.
Yeah. Have you guys been watching Cooper Cup,
Mm-mm.
the receiver for the Los Angeles Rams?
Yeah. He was he walk on?
I don't know. All I know is
where'd he come out of?
he came out of nowhere.
Well, there you
University and nobody knows.
go. Yeah, I thought I saw him.
He's phenomenal.
I'm gonna look this up because I thought he played maybe in the national championship. Did he come out of Clemson maybe? And I think that's what he had a. Let me look this up.
But Craig, he's a wide receiver and he's right now the number one wide receiver. He on all fantasy leagues, that was everybody's first
My
choice.
dad's
Their
killing it in the
first pick
fantasy
was
football
Cooper
teams
Kupp.
right
I
now.
love that you play fantasy football.
Oh yeah. What's your team name, Dad?
Cadillacs.
Oh, the Cadillacs.
What's the I love when like post football when you see all of the bets that were lost when you lose fantasy football. Do you have to like wear a dress? What's your so what are the stakes here?
Well, we always have a big dinner at my cousin's restaurant. It's an Italian restaurant.
Here in Denver?
Yeah.
Where is
which
it?
one?
It's called Mama Louise. It's on Orchard and Parker Road,
All right.
right on the corner. Go in there,
Right.
tell him you know Lacey. If you tell him you know me, he'll tell you to get the hell out of the restaurant. And we just have a big thing there and then make fun of those that took second, third.
Love
It's
it.
like just traditional shame.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's the way it should
The
be.
original shame and guilt. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the people who kind of have that grit in them and they're not inherently good at anything, they can find success in other aspects of their life, finances and relationships. And whereas the people who are just naturally gifted, they just don't have that desire to learn how to do other things well because they haven't had to. They're just not, graced with the abilities.
The burden
Before-
of having to do
what'd you
hard
find
work.
out about
So not Clemson, Eastern Washington, but I think where I remember him is just the rookie receiver that won it with the Rams. Had a pretty big year.
Phenomenal, yeah.
Yeah,
And what
small. I watched a highlight with him over the weekend. I was like, man, that's a small receiver.
he can get open, and he's got speed.
Reminds me of McCaffrey.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, good point.
He just seems like I'm trying to think who else. I mean, just small receiver.
McCaffrey, it goes back to your other point. He had he had his dad,
Yeah.
he had the information. His mom was as good an athlete as the dad.
Well, and look at McCaffrey's kids.
Sure.
Yep. Well, and I
So,
think like that's something really interesting, just like the evolution of sport now, especially in the U.S. I was just doing an interview, and like I feel like, especially in Paralympic sport, more than anything, like it is the product of what I'm afraid of, but I've coined the term like it could become the privilege Olympics because like how much talent and how many athletes are we missing purely because they don't have the same resources and
yeah.
access? Like I mean,
Yep.
Usain Bolt is undisputed the best of all time, but like how many people do you think like in Africa could have been good sprinters, but because like just of the resources alone, like endurance sport is a little bit more accessible. They don't have cars, so they're gonna have to run there.
That's a good point. They have verified that there are some tribes in Africa where some of the guys can jump 8 feet in the
Oh yeah,
air.
I'm going there. I'm so excited.
They can,
Sorry, I just
they
like
can
scream
jump
into the
8
microphone.
feet, and they're just, they're
Standing still, straight leg. It's called adumu.
What?
Oh, here's a
Yeah.
here's a good story. So there's a
Wait. Standing still,
So-
straight leg.
no, not
Oh,
the what she's talking about. I've seen they're
Oh, this is just like a
they're jumpers, and but I'll bet their verticals over 48 inches easily.
there's a
not me.
a book
Like they're
called
jumping 10 feet with just by their brain power.
I like where this is going.
there's a tribe in Mexico called the Tarahumara, I believe, and they came up to the Leadville 100, and it was they didn't have shoes. They had to go to the dump. They found tires. They cut them up and they put them on their feet, and they smoked
Oh yeah.
everybody.
There's a lot of distance. There's a lot of
Yeah.
This is
distance
in your
runners
race?
in Mexico.
This is no. This is gosh. I read about it in a book called Born to Run.
Oh, that's a great book.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it just proves your point that there are so many people around the world that probably don't even know about the sport.
Or
You're-
it's like so unrealistic. Like one of the conversations I was having too is like how many women are missing out in sports just because of like cultural
Yep.
norms that you like, oh, well, women stay at home, especially like in Latin communities like that too. But women are like the mothers, they raise children. And so like how much like untapped talent are we missing out on? Like, and it's good that like there's kids that have resources and like parents that have made it to the top and stuff too. But it does make you think like the extreme other end where you're like, how many people that could have been the best, undisputed, just from pure talent that just didn't have access to a sport development program in any sense of the word.
I think it might be easier for them to get there. Like, hey, if I can jump this high or if I can run this fast, I can put it on YouTube. I mean, that also like comes from a point of privilege of like, well, they might not have.
A lot of people have smartphones now, though.
That's what I'm saying, right? Like, I think
WhatsApp.
I think it's possible to get now more than ever. It's easier to get your skills seen by other people.
Totally.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
much more information.
That is true. They have like high school recruiting videos on YouTube now.
Well, they kind of expect you to put your video together. I mean, at least a lot of baseball recruiting is, hey, you should be putting your own Instagram page together that is just highlights of yourself, or
Oh my God, these kids have to run their own
So-
business. Jesus, I barely do that myself.
right? But I mean,
But it's a part of the bag now. I mean, I work with a handful of like high school athletes, and
you gotta
I
market
was like
yourself.
asking for a little bit. No, I know. Well, it is a good bread and butter, but it's hard, man. High school sports are hard, and also, no offense to boys, but high school boys, it's just hard. I'm like, what are you feeling? You can tell they're like, I don't know, no idea, none at all. You're like, okay, let's go on a journey.
Before we put an end to this, there's something I'd like to mention to you guys, especially since you're concerned parents. One of the things that bothers me and coaches that I respect from all levels, from youth to high school, college, to even the pros, one of the things parents do that is just so sinful is their kid may be a good baseball player at 9 or 10, so boy, that's it. That's all I'm going to have this kid do. They send him to every camp, everything. And you really limit what some kids can do by not letting them be in other sports. I say this because in high school, when we were young, if you were an athlete, you played football, basketball, baseball, track. You did them all. And what I'm seeing now is all of a sudden the kid becomes 12 and that's all he does.
It's called
is
early
wrestle.
specialization.
Wrestlers, basketball players, boy, that's it. That's all they do. And I just realized that you can learn so many more skills that will help you if you're a baseball player by running track, let's say, or shooting baskets, focusing on the rim and stuff like that. But what they do is they direct their kid in just one direction. And I think that really hurts young athletes because you can get so much out of other sports that will add to.
Still enhances the development, right?
Yeah.
What do you say? What do you say if the kid wants, if that's what they want to do?
Yeah.
Well, if that's what they want to do, that's one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't stop. I mean, that doesn't that specialization is.
Specialization, thank you.
But
I was
it's-
looking
it's-
for that word.
It's bad.
I didn't say it loud
I stole
enough.
it. I stole it from you. I
It's
heard
okay.
it. But that continues on into adulthood.
For sure.
If you're an adult and you only do the few things that you like or you're good at, you're not going to be a very good, well-rounded person, a human being.
Good point.
So I think
Craig.
you have to get that instilled with, at a young age. Like, man, let's go do some pottery, man. Like, I've never done that. Like, let's go take a class. And then later on in life,
But I tried to answer your point. If a kid, if he knows that that's his passion, that's all he wants to do, then I'm all for it as long as he's still enjoying what he's doing.
Well, and I think there's. Sorry, Dad.
But when they're real young, like let's say the grade school kid, and the parent wants their son to be a major league baseball player, and that's all he's going to let him do. I think we do a lot of harm to that kid.
You really just don't know what the kid is going to be capable of.
Yeah.
I think at least
Yeah.
until high school.
When
I
it
mean,
limits
so many
growth.
things happen.
Well, and I think bring back to your point, because there are kids that are like, this is what I want to do. I love this sport.
Yeah.
And even with it translating to who we become as adult human people, I think a lot of that also has to do with athlete identity. And you see this anyways with Olympians, with people that make it to the very tops. This is where we see athletes really struggle with retirement and who they are outside of that sport. And sometimes you retire not on your choice. Sometimes your contract gets cut, or sometimes you get so injured that you will never return to sport again. So creating ways to build deeper foundations and create a dynamic person, because even if they're I love baseball, that's all I want to do is baseball, you're yeah, let's go see a movie with your friends. It's still finding ways to have an identity outside of the sport. That way, one, when you're doing the sport, you really are enjoying it because it's something that is you're passionate about and you love it, but also it's not the only thing that's getting you up out of bed, because inevitably life is amazing at just serving disappointment.
But that's what Craig's saying. It makes you more rounded.
Yeah, you have to
well-rounded
have
person.
identities outside of just the one thing that you do,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's hard.
yeah, we
It
see
is
that
hard.
all the time. I mean, I think the average lifespan of a firefighter after they retire is 5 to 10 years.
Oh my God.
Just because you spend 30 years in the same uniform. So not your identity goes so deep that is your clothing choices. I mean,
Yeah.
it's part of the way you introduce yourself. It's, people, hey, this is my husband, he's a fire. It's such a part of and deeply ingrained. And if you leave the fire service and you don't have another passion or a place to put that energy, I mean, what do you do?
Just like any professional athlete that has to retire, they struggle.
Yep.
It's hard because you want it in order to get to that level. You have to kind of be all in, And
Yeah.
it's hard to create
Yes.
that balance.
Yes.
And it's, if I'm doing something else, that's taken away from
That's-
how good I could
For
be.
sure,
It's such a hard thing.
Everything
to
is
balance.
strategic, right?
Yeah.
You have to do
Yeah.
everything strategically.
Yep. Well, TJ, this is your first podcast. You did great.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
a
you really-
podcast
You're
pro.
you're
What do you
expert.
think?
Oh.
You're the life of the show.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've dabbled.
Yeah.
You did good, Dad. You kicked ass.
Crushed.
Lacey killed it as always.
Yeah, do you want to plug anything? You got anything coming up?
What do I have anything coming up that's public? Well, I'm going to do that sport exchange program in Tanzania. I'm going to definitely try to outjump somebody there.
Yeah, awesome.
When I saw that, I'm like, it's over.
It's game
'cause I
time.
am still a competitor.
Yeah.
I think I'm still running track. I'm pretty sure my coach and I have decided I'm still running track for a couple more years. So.
I think you'll probably be pretty good at the mental side of sports performance coaching.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, when I'm not having to read about it. That's what my
Yeah,
ironically.
but you sit down in front of somebody and you're like, all right, let's talk about grit and let's talk about.
It's been good. It's been good. Yeah, I work
Yeah.
with athletes already, but it's like the ironic thing is my performance went down this year just because of all the reading and stuff in grad school. I mean, yeah, it's like I did something that was important to me, but like my performance did suffer. So it's time to get it back up, I think, and end on a high note.
Where can they find you on social media?
My Instagram is Lacey is your friend. That was my AIM screen name, but it's stuck. It's a good brand. It's on brand.
Wow.
Yeah, you guys remember that?
Oh, I do.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mine's too embarrassing to even
Say out
try
loud.
and say out loud.
Well, I thank you guys.
Yeah,
This has
thank
been
you so
great.
much.
Yeah, this was great.
That was awesome.
Now, if you guys don't mind, I got to pee like a monkey.